evening. Welcome to the Talk Right podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Stennett, and tonight we've got a very special guest for me, an author that I've been reading his books. Well, I had hair when I read his first one, and Nick Sullivan is my co-host. And Nick, why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about our guest tonight?
Well, aside from being one of your literary idols, Dr. James W. Hall is the author of 21 novels, 15 of which are in the extremely popular Thorn series. And we're going to hear all about Mr. Thorn in a bit. Also, something I found of particular interest since I started with screenplays and then turned them into novels, Dr. Hall has two screenplays and an optioned pilot, or a pilot, and a series that's been optioned for Netflix. So all sorts of interesting possibilities of going novel in the other direction. So we'll be hearing all about this in today's episode.
Welcome to our show, Jim. It's been, you have no idea how excited I am to have you on with us. I've been reading ever since they came out in hardbacks, the originals.
Well, I'm excited that you're excited.
So 17 or 15 Thorn novels, and Thorn is one of my favorite characters. Thorn's his last name. I just found that out. All this time, for the last 34 years, I didn't know. But in your latest book, Bad Axe, it is revealed that it's his last name. And does he have a first name? That's the first question.
Yeah, there was one of the books, I can't remember which one, 2 or 3 books ago, where I just mentioned in passing that his full name was Daniel Oliver, or I think it was Oliver Thorn. So Dot was his initials.
His initials.
But I've never come back to that. I mean, actually, everybody knows him as Thorn, so that's his name.
And Thorn lives in Key Largo in a house that he built himself
Right.
out of scrap lumber. And it sounds real familiar to me. My character, Jesse, did the same thing on an island up in the Content Keys.
Well, years ago, I met a guy in Key Largo, when I was living in Key Largo full time, who had built such a house, and he built it out of scrap lumber that he rescued from the Miami, I can't remember where exactly it was, but these were old shipping containers that were made out of rare hardwoods from all over the third world, in Indonesia, Malaysia, and so forth. And they'd cut down their incredibly wonderful forests to build boxes to ship stuff to America. And he salvaged this wood and used it to build this enormous, wonderful house that he gave me a tour through. And so I basically gave all those characteristics to Thorn, because it just played into the environmental issues that Thorn is continually interested in. And it just seemed like a really wonderful, colorful way to begin, his life in that particular house.
Well, I hope you don't mind, but I just straight up stole that with my first Jesse book.
Hey, you're welcome to it. I mean, that's what is it? I guess it was T.S. Eliot that said, mediocre writers borrow, great writers steal. And great writers steal, and then they make it into their own. So it's not really stolen anymore. They just take it, and mediocre writers borrow it, and it still smells like the original writer's work. So I know in your case, you stole it, and good riddance. Good for you.
My writing mentor, when I was first starting out, a guy named Michael Reisig, he writes the Road to Key West series. And in my first book, I had a Jamaican character named Rufus. And I found Michael's books about 2 or 3 weeks after I published my first one. And I'm reading his first book. I thought, oh, this is really great. And I turned the page and he's got a Jamaican character named Rufus. And I got an email from him and I was really worried that he was going to sue me or something. But we got to be good friends. And he told me that there are no original thoughts, that we're all a product. Everything we write is a product of what we've read and what we've seen on TV. And so I took a few liberties like that. It's just as we all did from Travis McGee.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, another quote that I like is that literature is a long conversation that we're having with the past, with all, just as you said, with all the books you've read and the things that you've incorporated in your own thinking and your own values, and that has to work out in a natural way in what you write.
So I'm reading Bad Axe right now, and I have been to Bad Axe, so I don't need anybody to tell me where it's at. Highway 53 North, up at the Thumb.
Yeah.
I picked up a load of iron ore there.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's a very small town. Why'd you pick Bad Axe as the location for the
Well, that's
antagonists?
there's I mean, well, it's a complicated answer, but I was living in a place in Key Largo. My wife and I go and rent a condo in this particular place in Key Largo. We've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years. And there was somebody from Bad Axe that had a bumper sticker from the car dealership in Bad Axe. And the first time I saw it, I said, oh, holy shit, that would be a great title. Because I'm always looking for a title that's a pun, that has multiple meanings and that would look good on a hat, which I then made, because it sounds like badass and then Bad Axe, ACTS. And I thought, well, that's just perfect. So I had to figure out a way to get Thorn to Bad Axe, which was quite a challenge because he's so stuck in Key Largo. He doesn't really travel much. So that was part of my goal in the overall book, was to figure out a natural way that he was drawn to Bad Axe so I could use that name in the title.
Well, he's always been very much a homebody, but in the last few books, he's moved around a little bit. He's gone up to North Carolina, he's out to Arizona, and up to the Thumb of Michigan.
Right. Yeah. There's only so much you can do. Part of it, this, and I'm sure Nick knows this too, is when you write multiple books that are in the same setting, you mine all the fool's gold that's sitting on the surface, the easy stuff of the descriptions of the place and the feel of the place and the characters that live there and so forth. And, and eventually, in my case, and I'm sure it's been true for you all, you start to think, am I repeating myself? Have I said this before? Have I written this before? After so many books set in the same place, there is that temptation or that danger. So to kind of break the curse of that, I've sent him off against his best instincts to places he's never been before. So he has to describe some new landscapes at least.
Yeah, I find myself when I'm writing something, I write a paragraph and I think, oh, this really sounds familiar. Oh, yeah, that's right. It happened, 10 books ago.
Yeah, you need some way to search all your books so you can find that phrase, instead of just book by book search. But I know it happens to me all the time. Dialogue's the same way. Have I had this witty repartee in another book? It seems like I've I've had this before. You know, I'm constantly fending that concern off, but it's just the curse of doing too many books, I guess.
So in Under the Cover of Daylight, first book, Thorn's parents are racing back to Key Largo to get there within 24 hours. And we know the reason for that. And some of our viewers might like to know. Tell us about that.
It's traditionally or thought in the Keys that if you're back into the Keys within 24 hours after being born, if you have to be born, God forbid, back on the mainland, you can still be considered a conch, which is very important to most people who live in the Keys. If you're back within 24 hours, the newborn child is back in that time. So they were rushing back to complete that mission, and it became the sort of dark shadow over Thorn's life as a result. That being a conch was both a blessing and a curse for the rest of his life.
Yeah, it definitely was. That was, like I said, that was the first of your books that I read. It came out in, I think it was the summer of '87.
Yeah, I think fall of '87.
Yeah. I think I got it for Christmas. And I mean, I just tore through that book. And then I'm like, oh man, has this guy written anything else? So I hustled on down to Walden Books, and no, he hasn't written anything else yet, or no, anything else in this series anyway. So I got on the mailing list, and Walden Books would send me a real letter in the mail, U.S. mail, and say, oh, this author has released a new book. So, and then I'd run down and get the next one.
I wish there were like 50,000 of you, Wayne. That would have changed the trajectory of my career. If more people had gotten that for a Christmas present. But enough got it that I, you know, as a first novel, this is one of the stories that about Thorn and how he got to have 15 novels written about him. You know, this was a first novel. I had no intention of writing anything else about Thorn. I felt like after that book, I had told his complete story, and I wasn't setting him up as a serious character. I didn't think that far ahead. But the book did very well and got good reviews in the New York Times and other places and big ads. And, you know, so they spent some money in it, they promoted it, and it did well. Much better than the average first novel. And as a result, I had moved on to the second novel, which was about somebody else, a different character, a different place, not Key Largo anymore. And my editor at Norton called me up one day and said, the paperback publisher will pay a lot more money for the paperback rights to Under Cover of Daylight if they know that the second book is also about Thorn. So they've got the first in the series. And I didn't really understand the business. You know, I was an academic and I didn't understand what this meant. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm 150 pages into the next one and it's not about Thorn. And my editor said, a lot more money. And you know, I still didn't get it because I'd never really written for money before. I'd always written for other reasons. And I said, I'm sorry, you know, I can't do it. I'm 150 pages. It's this other guy. And he said, well, wait a minute. Don't you write on a computer? And I said, yeah. And he said, don't you have find and replace on your computer program? And I said, yeah. And he said, just change the guy's name. It's just a couple of keystrokes. I said, but it's a different guy. You know, he acts different. He talks different. He lives in a different place. Everything about him is different. And he thought about it for a minute and said, well, people change. No. This was my introduction to literary publishing in New York, you know, that a lot more money was the ruling consideration of all things in New York. So I eventually got, as you can see, a lot more money meant something to me. So eventually I got back to Thorn.
So you just had to go back in and find and replace his name, and then find and
No, I
replace
did a
his
little more.
town. And
I scrapped that book. I
oh,
put
really?
it became the third novel. It became Buns of Coral, and so I wrote a second novel that was about Thorn. But that was the reason. Eventually, publishers in the future also did some stuff like that. Maybe 5 or 6 books in, I've written a book about international animal smuggling, about orangutans in Borneo, and it wasn't about Thorn. Thorn wasn't in it. It was a standalone. And my editor called me up one day, a different editor, a different publisher, and said, "Oh, we really love this book, but couldn't this guy Chip be Thorn?" And I said, "Oh, well, what the hell? I'll just do the find and replace thing," and said, "Oh, you know, I'll sell my soul to the devil and just replace his name and change him just slightly." And to this day, when I used to go on the book tour all the time, people would come up to me and say, "What was wrong with Thorn in Gone Wild? He didn't act like himself." I say, "No, he didn't, because he was Chip. His real name was Chip."
That would have taken a lot of fixing. Bones of Coral and Buzzcut. Those were 2 of my favorites.
Oh, great.
Those are back in 90 and
Yeah.
90 and 93.
Right. Early 90s. Yeah, those were Buns of Coral. That was the third novel that actually I started on a second book, and I left my publisher for a different publisher, and Sonny Mehta was the big shot New York publisher, and he was at Knopf, which was very prestigious literary publisher, and all that meant a lot to me at the time. And they wanted this book very much. It sold to, it was MGM, bought the rights to it, and brought me out to California. We had the meeting with all the producer and the head of the studio and all these people. So this was like this glamour, you know, this thing that you've dreamed about, you know, since you were a kid, that it was going to happen. And they even hired me and my buddy to write the screenplay. And we turned the screenplay in, and they said, "Nah, we don't really like the screenplay. It's too much like the book."
But isn't it supposed to be?
That's the point. Then they bought the book, and then they wanted the screenplay to be some other story. You know, I had to invent a new story for this. I didn't really understand how screenplays worked at that time anyway. So, but you know, to me, that was another part of my education is the Hollywood side, that you know, cash the check and walk away, and you know, just hope that they don't cancel the check before it pays out, you know, because it's unlikely that anything ever is really going to happen out there.
Yeah, Hollywood buys the rights to probably 20,000, 50,000 books a year.
Right.
And very, very few ever make it. But I would love to see Bones of Coral on the big screen. That would be, I mean, not their version of it, but your version of it.
Well, yeah. Well, that won't happen anytime soon. But it was fun. It was, you know, the whole thing was very interesting. I learned a lot. I got some good stories that I can dine out on in the future. But, you know, and the money, the initial money for the to buy the rights to do the option that they renewed once was very good. You know, it was excellent. It's sort of for a college professor, which I was at the time, this was like almost change your life money. Even if the movie never got made. If the movie got made, your life really would be changed. But this was pretty good on the way there.
You mentioned, oh, go ahead, Nick.
Well,
yeah,
we have
Nick's on here too. I forgot.
Hey, Nick.
We're idle. No, we have a lot of writers that watch this, so I'm sure that they're like leaning forward and salivating a bit as they listen to this last bit. So I would like, when you're now a member of Tropical Authors, and as such, we had to do a little research and we put up what we knew about you. A number of us noticed that you had a potential option of the Thorn series in general for Netflix. And can we ask, how long ago was that? Is that now like part of the pandemic rush, or was that early on?
No, it's still current. It's still active. What's the guy's name? He is Jordan probably knows this, but I don't know. I can't remember his name. He was the lead singer in Maroon 5, a rock and roll group.
Adam Levine.
Adam Levine.
That's it. I knew she would know.
I'm deaf in this ear, and I got my earbud in this ear, so I can. So.
He apparently has a connection to Key Largo, and he bought the rights or optioned the book. I don't know anything more about it than that he optioned it for NBC Universal for a year and a half. Couldn't get anything going with them, and then he upped the amount when that option ran out. He upped the amount a little bit and got Netflix involved, and so that option is still current. And last I checked, it's sort of everything is disconnected. Like you said, there's a sort of pandemic quiet that's at work here. So nobody's invited me to participate. Nobody's informed me about anything. I've queried my agent out there, and he said, we don't know anything either. So it's just all silence.
Well, just in the event that one of those folks from Netflix is watching this, just think how popular Bloodlines was. And if they hadn't jumped the shark in the 3rd season, that would probably still be going. Why not another Keys series? I mean, it's just such a fantastic setting. I would love to see the Thorn series.
I always thought Bloodline, which I thought the first year was very good. I always thought somebody had read some of my books, because there were some things there that were.
Oh, there were definitely some similarities.
Yeah, not exactly plagiarism, but there were things that clearly they should have invited me to participate in some way, because there were things that I got this from my friends in Key Largo who knew the book and knew the series very well. And they said, "Hey, what did you sell that to Bloodlines?" No, it was just. There's some things that when you write about Key Largo, it's inevitable that there's stuff that's going to overlap, because it's a small town, really, and everybody knows everybody, which is one of the problems that I've run into with Thorn. If he were living in LA or New York, he could have multiple huge issues, or like Travis in Fort Lauderdale. A large enough city, he could get involved in all these nefarious and catastrophic events, and it would be under the radar. But in Key Largo, that would get around. Thorn, look out for this guy. Don't sleep with Thorn, because that puts you in imminent danger. Any woman that comes into his life is in even more danger. Which I mentioned once at a bookstore when I was signing in Key Largo. I said, it would be nuts for somebody in Key Largo to actually, given Thorn's reputation, to get involved with this guy. And two women in the audience said, I would. So apparently Key Largo is an exception to the rule, or Thorn outweighs their worry somehow.
Well, all of Thorn's women are warned, and they just ignore the warnings.
Yeah, that's right.
In the latest one, Sophia, all her friends said, "Stay away from him."
I know.
What does she do?
That's what I'm having to deal with, is people saying, don't go near this guy. Poor Thorn, he's got such a bad rep now that it's a wonder he can find any woman to smile back at him.
But you mentioned earlier about the prestige of being published by a big publishing company. And since then, well, since recently anyway, you've done a kind of a 180, and now you're publishing your own.
Yeah.
How's that? How you're enjoying that?
You know, I'm glad you asked that, because it's been a life-changing experience, and it's still changing my life. And I'm struggling. I have to admit, I'm struggling, because you guys, I have so much admiration for what you all have accomplished in your own publishing careers, that you have managed to make yourselves to sell a lot of books, to get a big audience, to get readers. You've done it yourself without anybody, in New York, or any publicist, or anybody sending you out on the book tour, or book reviews in the newspaper, all the conventional stuff that I had back in the 80s and 90s. That was the normal way before there was ebooks and before there were all the other platforms that you could publish on. I became basically lazy, compared to what you're doing and what I must do now. I depended on all these other people to do the work for me, to sell the book, market it, find out the target audience, send me to the right places, spend their money wisely. And they didn't. They overall, that's the publishing world has really not changed much in the last.
They seem to have like a punch card, a list of things that they do. This is what we did 50 years ago, so this is what we're going to do today.
That's exactly right. You're exactly right, Wayne. That's completely true. And I mean, I went from Norton to Knopf to Delacorte to St. Martin. So I had 4 different major publishers, and all of them used the same punch card. They all did exactly the same thing, and they all had similar results. So you're not going to have, even though they're going to pour a lot of money into it and paid me an inordinate amount of money up front, it didn't produce the results that all of us would have wished. Where if I had had that money to spend as you are spending your money now to promote myself in a way that you can do now, I'd be much farther along, financially and in sales than in the traditional route. But that was all that anybody knew. When I started in the 80s, this was the only game in town. So, I'm sort of a foster child from that previous world, that now just seems, to me, it seems corrupt and ineffective, and not really where the readers are. The readers are, finding the books that they like to read, and they're reading 10 a month or 20 a month. New York depends on the occasional reader. They're just targeting a whole different kind of audience, and it's been very difficult and very challenging, but exciting too. I like not having somebody else making all these important decisions in my life, and I like not having to pay 15% to my agent, which is money right off the top. Don't let her see this video, please.
It's live.
Whoops. Uh-oh. Well, She knows that
But I
already.
don't think she's watching. Maybe, I don't know.
No, I don't think so. But
Well,
that-
your first what, 8 books? You didn't even have a contract for ebooks because ebooks didn't exist at the time.
right, right.
So you published those yourself as ebooks.
Yeah, because they didn't have ebook contracts, I could take them myself and put them online, and I've done that with those, and they make they do well. I need to learn more from you guys and the others in this world about how to promote myself in a way that's effective. But yeah, they do fine. But
But then you
there's a
get to
whole-
that 8th book going from a price of $2.99 for the ebook for the 7th one, and it jumps up to $14.99 or something like that.
right. Yeah, to me, that's just outrageous. Because the publisher's still charging $14.99 for ebooks and selling 5 a year or something. I don't know. I don't even know how much they're selling because I don't get royalty statements on those things anymore. They're selling so few. But yeah, I need to have a more graduated rate scale on my own books. There's just a lot of stuff I need to learn how to do. I need to get off my ass, and my lifelong habit for 35 years. I've been doing this since 1987, so we're talking about, I wrote 4 novels before the first one was published. So I really started in the early 80s. So this is whatever it is, 20 years, 50 years, 40 years, something like that I've been doing this. And it's really hard to break the habits of all those years of doing it one way. I'm trying to relearn this new situation, which I have a lot of respect for. I'm not like some highfalutin, if you're not on the New York Times bestseller list, you don't count. That's just silliness to me now. It just seems like wrong-headed thinking that I bought into for many years.
It's a brave new world out there. Nick, you were going to say something and I cut you off.
I don't remember what it was. I'm so sorry. I do not recall. But I have some questions here.
Sure.
Okay.
So when I was looking at the description of Thorn, what I loved was he makes a meager living tying bonefish flies. I thought, okay, that's a pretty cool job. And from all the narration I do, set in the Keys, mostly Wayne's, but a few others, I've learned a thing or two about fishing bonefish, and I know some of our other authors actually bonefish. So have you fished for bonefish? I mean, what is it that he does, and who does he sell them to? Does he do some kind of custom thing?
Yeah, well, those are all good questions. And I was just writing a 2 or 3 page passage where somebody got in his face about these very issues. Why would anybody buy your bonefish flies? Why wouldn't they just tie their own? Which most fishermen do. It's not that complicated. But the conceit that I've had since the very beginning is that there's something creative and magical and effective about what Thorn does. That's very creative, very unusual and unique. And I mean, he for instance, takes roadkill pelts off the highway near his house and takes the fur from them and feathers that fall on his property or that wash ashore on his land and uses those for his materials. And there are enough people in the Keys that believe that his magic works, just enough to keep him, going. So, I mean,
And he doesn't need a whole lot. I mean, his boat's paid for, his house is paid for, everything Does he still have that old Volkswagen?
Yes, he does. We won't
It's-
talk about
it's-
property tax or our homeowners insurance or anything like that, but he does manage to sort of fly below the radar, which creates a problem. You know, he doesn't have a driver's license. He doesn't have a social security card. He's never really entered the system. So, you know, for in this last novel, Bad Axe, I had to fly him to Arizona and fly him to Michigan. And the question, he can't fly commercial because he doesn't have any ID. So I have to invent characters who can fly him places and have them naturally come into the story. So the consequences of a lot of the decisions that I made early on about who this guy was are still like haunting me and driving what the stories turn out to be about, you know, and who the characters are, because he's so unique and weird. He doesn't really fit in the normal pattern of American life.
And by the way, you pissed me off when you killed Bobby Tennyson.
Sorry.
But
Yeah, I know, I
I mean,
liked
Bobby was just he was, you know, just a kind of a laid back guy, all through the Vietnam War. Now he's in his 70s. I pictured him with a long gray ponytail. But yeah, I mean, you have to have somebody fly him around because he can't get around on his own. He can't even get a bus ticket.
Yeah, you see my problem. But you know, one of my theories, or not theories, but one of my beliefs about characters is I like to hear that I pissed you off, that I killed Bobby Tennyson, because the characters who die have to matter. You know,
Yes.
if they don't matter, the story doesn't matter. And to me, that's what's wrong with a lot of some kind of fiction and certain kinds of movies, and you can take it back to Agatha Christie. You know, somebody dies and it's just a body on the floor. It's just this embarrassment that we have to clean up. And then it just becomes a logical game to figure out who killed that person. I think the obligation a writer has is to make somebody come alive before you knock them off. You have
Yes.
to care about them. They have to matter in some way. Otherwise, the whole thing's a sham. You know, it's just a fake. If somebody dies and they don't matter, then why is anybody even concerned? So yeah, I'm glad that it pissed you off.
Well, I don't mind telling you, there was a little bit of eyeball sweat when Sophia was telling Thorn about holding Bobby's hand, and there wasn't any doctors or nurses there.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little choked up just talking. That's how you can tell a really good storyteller is when they can make you so involved in a minor character, a secondary character. You know that the main character is going to triumph in the end. They always do. But when a minor character becomes a favorite, and then something happens, and it breaks your heart, and that's what good literature is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you feel things that you don't feel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I completely agree. And that's a hard thing to do because, you know, when I start, I don't work with an outline, so I don't really know who's going to die and who's going to live or where we're going to go and what it's going to all be about. And, you know, I follow Elmore Leonard, Elmore Leonard was one of my early influences too. And he became a good friend over the years. And so I got a lot of his like one-liners that I sort of still live by. And one of the things that he was asked frequently by fans was, does he use an outline? And his answer was, why would I write the book if I knew how it was going to turn out? I thought,
That's
wow,
excellent
that's
point.
it.
I write the same way. If you look behind Nick, you see all those Post-it notes. He's a plotter. You and I are
think I have to
pantsers.
see them.
We write by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, I admire both sides. You know, I've known writers, very successful writers, Jeffrey Deaver, James, various writers who never wrote the first sentence until they knew the last sentence. They needed to know exactly where they were going the whole way through, and they write very, very good books. It's just sort of a, you know, it's an individual habit of mind. There's no right way about this answer, the answer to that question. That's, for me, I just enjoy, my wife doesn't enjoy it because I'm coming out of the room and I don't know where the hell this is going. And she says, this always happens at page 125. And it also happens at page 150. You know, I don't know where I'm going.
I can hear my wife laughing downstairs right now.
And I'm, you know, walking around the house and I'm depressed. I think I can't do this anymore. You know, it's like, I don't know what the whole, why I'm even bothering with this, because it just doesn't make any sense. But
that's when you just jump ahead and write the next chapter and then come back to it. That's the beauty of writing. That's the beauty of being a pantser.
Absolutely. That's why God created the delete key. It's just that I wind up deleting a lot more than I would like. And I really admire those Post-it notes, Nick. I wish I could find a corkboard big enough.
If you actually look at what I put on these Post-its and then you look at the final product of the book, the last third is almost never what's actually up there. You know, I structure it in a certain way and swing for the fences, and a lot of times the characters will pull me off of the railroad tracks. But I kind of like to be shot in the right direction, at least for me. But I've always had a mathematical kind of way of looking at the world. And I think that's something I need.
That's the way you should work then. That is the way you do work. And that's a good thing. There's not a high road and a low road in this regard. It's every man for himself.
So
I want to ask a question about, especially since we're talking about some of these sub characters. Who is Sugar Man, or does he?
I was going to ask that.
Sorry,
that was my next question. Go ahead. Tell us about Sugar.
Well, you know, Sugarman was, you know, everybody needs a sidekick, and my original concept, or every hero, I think, needs a sidekick, somebody they can talk to, because you need some, you know, witty dialogue now and then, when otherwise the character would just be alone and you'd be stuck in his inner consciousness, and that's boring as hell. I used to tell my writing students, who always seemed to write the same story over and over again, it was somebody sitting in a bathtub thinking you can't find anything more boring to write about than somebody sitting in a bathtub thinking. You've got to have somebody that they can talk to. At least put somebody else in the bathroom that they can talk to, that's sitting on the toilet, or then it becomes interesting. So Sugarman was just to fulfill that, number one. And number two, I wanted somebody who was sort of a balance to Thorn. Thorn is this impulsive, impetuous, creative. He is a monkey wrench kind of guy. He's not Sherlock Holmes. He's not you, Nick. He's not thoughtful. He doesn't use Post-it notes. He's impulsive and weird. And so I needed somebody like you. And that's who Sugarman is. He's thoughtful. He's logical. He plays by the rules. Thorn doesn't. He has a rule book at gene level, in his DNA. Sugarman is honest and trustworthy and a Boy Scout to the core. And so when he's tempted, or when he's up against some outrageous thing that Thorn is about to do, there's tension between them, and that creates a certain amount of drama that's ongoing even when there's not anybody else on stage. So to me, he's like the good foil for Thorn, and they're great buddies. They complement each other. They they complete each other. And Thorn helps Sugarman break out of his rigidity a lot of the times too. So it goes both ways. That's who he is for me.
Yeah, Thorn and
He's an
Sugar
interesting
go
guy.
back.
He knows all the stuff that Thorn couldn't know. Stuff about the internet, stuff about technology, stuff about the world that Thorn refuses to even learn about or want to know about. So he's also the conduit for a lot of information that Thorn couldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, Sugar is a very sensitive guy too, and that gets him into trouble quite a bit. And
True.
usually it's somebody who picks him as a mark, an easy mark, when he's not really that easy. He's pretty capable himself. I mean, I've read him or seen him in my mind take out some serious characters.
Yeah, he's that guy in high school, and I played a lot of sports in high school, and he's that guy in high school who looks skinny and not very strong, but he's got those long ropey muscles, and he can move a lot of guys a lot bigger than he is when he needs to. And that's what I always think about him, is he's kind of this deceptive. He doesn't look or want to be a tough guy, but he is a tough guy.
And with his heritage, a Scandinavian mother and a Jamaican Rastafari father,
Right.
he's got that look. He's just very soft and gentle, and people just take that as they make a big mistake when they take that as an easy mark.
Yeah, he's sort of my Denzel Washington kind of guy. Very, very handsome, very debonair. Not your normal guy that he was in the police for a while, so he has a police background. Now he's a private eye. And originally, early on in the novels, I thought, now this would be a nice reversal of the normal tradition in these kinds of books, where the sidekick is actually Thorn, and the problems, the stories come from the PI, the private investigator, come from Sugarman. As it's turned out over the years, that hasn't really worked out to be the case, but it could in the future. I'm not done yet, so I may yet get around to the original concept that I had at the very beginning back in the 80s.
Okay, I got a question from Don Rich on YouTube. He's another member of our Tropical Authors, and he wants to know who you would think would play Thorn if it did go to Hollywood.
Oh,
that's always a good question.
That's fun. That's a nice masturbatory question. It's changed over the years, and at different times when different people had optioned the books, they talked about different characters, always progressively younger than what I had envisioned. I sort of started with one of Jeff Bridges and sort of this sandy-haired, nincompoopish, somebody that was capable of being the Big Lebowski, but also could be tough when called upon. So, I don't really have the modern equivalent to that. These days, if it were really going to be made into a series, they would choose somebody that I'd never heard of. Some 23-year-old who was an up-and-comer. But I've always thought of him as this sort of scruffy, sandy-haired middleweight. Not anybody that was super formidable. Somebody that can kind of disappear in a crowd that you wouldn't even notice.
I'm over here
Oh,
reading reading on
Yeah,
YouTube. I'm
do
sorry.
you have any more? Do you have any more questions there?
No, I don't have my readers on, so it gets difficult for me sometimes.
All right. Well, while you work on that, uh, oh, so we see that you taught at the Florida International University. How many years did you teach? Did you teach writing? Did you make
Yeah.
your students read your books, and did you make them buy them first? What
No, I taught for 40 years. Um, and my claim to fame about teaching is that I had a lot of students who went on to have gone on to do very well. Maybe the star is Dennis Lehane, who wrote Mystic River, Academy Award winning movie.
narrated one of his books for Library of Congress.
Right. He was a student of mine. He did research for me on mean high tide, I guess it was, and got me steered toward tilapia, which I eventually wrote about. He wrote a series of short stories for his master's fine art thesis, and the one story that we rejected from that collection was Mystic River, which he apparently decided he would show us, and he went on and wrote the novel, and became this big success. But we've had some really good students over the years. Vicki Hendricks is another one who wrote Miami Purity and a bunch of very good noir books. Barbara Parker was one of ours too. She went on to be a New York Times bestseller, mystery writer. We had a bunch of writers that went through the program that I just decided they were creating too much competition. It was time to retire. Stop sharing my secrets. But that was my dream job, when I was a young person, to be a college professor and have 9 months working and 3 months off and get to wear shorts for 40 years, which I did. Because it's in Miami, I could teach in shorts, and it was a very, very good job, very comfortable job, and worked with some really good writers in the creative writing program that my friend Les Standiford, who's also a novelist and writes historical fiction, nonfiction now, good buddy of mine. He put the program together, and we together hired a bunch of the faculty, and it was a good life. But that's a totally different life than the one that I'm in now, which is sort of yippee-ki-yay. You're out here on the range dealing with all the wilderness on your own. That I had the protection of the institution. I had the protection of a traditional publishing house. I never was without a publisher for like 35 years. So I never, that never lapsed. I just moved from one to another, and usually got a raise when I moved to the other. So this is, I think of this as being the way it's going to be. The independent publishing world is the way it's going to be the rest of our lives. And it will eventually, I think, eclipse traditional publishing, if it hasn't already, in terms of numbers and sales and readership. Because this is the way that I read books now. I don't read books. I don't go to bookstores. I don't go read the New York Times book review and choose my books from there. And I don't think most other people do either. So, in a way, that was another world. It was a great experience, but it was a bit of a handicap considering what I'm facing now and what you all are so good at.
Well, you've got the ebook rights to the first, what is it, 7?
7 or 8, yeah.
And of course, Bad Axe and
Right.
is self-published.
Anything new that I do, yeah.
what are the chances of you getting the rights, the paperback and the hardcover rights to the early books?
I've tried a couple of times, and they have been reluctant to do that. I don't know why, because I can't imagine at $14.99 they're selling too many ebooks. You know, I saw this, and my wife and I used to talk about this all the time. When the first Nook appeared back, I don't remember when exactly it was, but we both saw this as inevitable. As soon as you can see that you no longer have to print books, ship books, store books, send them to bookstores, put them on the shelves, and then send them back when they don't sell to the warehouse or dispose of them. As soon as we saw that that was possible, we both said, oh my God, this is going to change everything. And the publishers better get, their shit together and get on this train right away. And they didn't. They were so stuck in their usual way of doing business. They didn't see the danger of this to themselves. And now they're reaping the harvest, the whirlwind that they ignored for all these years. Screw them. That's my feeling. They made a wrong decision, chose a wrong direction.
From what I've read, recent research, more than 50% of books read today, or I should say last year, 2020, more than 50% were self-published.
Is that right?
So it's definitely the tides are changing.
Yeah.
And
I
it won't be long.
I can see how that would be true. And it just makes sense from the writer's point of view. The whole idea of being able to control, even though it's a pain in the ass to do that stuff that I'm trained to do, the marketing, publicity, and things like this, that it only makes sense for a writer to use this format rather than to try to break down the door of a New York publisher. That just doesn't, the money in New York is like, it hasn't changed. When I first started in 87, the average first novel advance was $10,000. And most writers did not repay that advance. That's $2. Think of this. That's $2 a book for a $20 book. They would get 10%, or the writer would get 10% of the sales of the book to repay their advance. So that's $20 for a hardback book. The writer gets $2 towards their advance. So if they got $10,000, they'd have to sell 5,000 books to pay back their advance. Most writers did not sell 5,000 books, did not pay their advance back. I just saw an article in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago that during this year, the average sales of a hardback book in the United States was 5,000 books. It hasn't changed in 30 or 40 years. Think of that. Think of the smallness of that. What other business in America would be happy with selling, 20,000 shirts or 20,000 anything? But the book business, the New York book business, that's the way they operate. Those are the numbers. It's just, and it really hasn't changed. That's still the average. Maybe it's up to $15,000 advance. Occasionally they would put their chips on some book that they thought might, pay them a lot more, and they'd spend $50,000, but still a very small amount when you take out agents' fees and the IRS. That's not much, and it really hasn't changed in all these years.
No, that's the program that they run. That's what we did last year. It's what we did 50 years ago. It's what we're going to do this year. It's what we're going to do next year.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Well, Nick, do you have anything else? We're at the bottom of the hour.
Well, we've only had one question from you two. Do we have any more?
No, not really. Not that we haven't touched on already.
Okay. let me check here. Oh, yeah. 21 novels, 15 of them are Thorn. What are the other 6? Do you have any little favorites that really stand out?
Well, Buns of Coral is not Thorn. Heart of Ground is sort of a historical novel set in Miami. Then I wrote 2 for Amazon for Thomas and Mercer that were, I'd always wanted to try to write an international thriller, you know, where Robert Ludlum, John le Carré kind of book. Just try something completely different, flex some new muscles. So I got a deal with Thomas and Mercer for Amazon, and they made one of the books a Kindle first, which means, you know, they're giving away to Kindle Unlimited people or Prime members. They're giving away, in my case, a couple of 100,000 books to stimulate sales for the next book in the list. That was When They Come For You, and the second one was When You Can't Stop. And both of those featured a woman who was my international, you know, not spy exactly, but she had an axe to grind, and she was traveling to Europe and Africa and various places to resolve a problem that was very personal to her. So those 2 are distinct from the other books. Let's see, there was another one. I wrote a couple of collections of short stories that are online, that are mine, that are out there. I won an Edgar for one of the short stories in one of the collections that it's called Overexposure, I think it's called. You know, I'm not paying. That's a lot of books. That's a lot of years. That was a terrible question, Nick. I'm sorry. I should have written all that stuff down. I don't have that on the tip of my tongue. The rest of those books. But, I also wrote this.
That's all right. Nick's only written 5 books, so he can keep track of those real easy. I'm up to like 25, and somebody asked me a question, and I'm like, oh, geez, I don't remember which book that was.
I've also got this book that came out of a course I used to teach at the university called Hit Lit, which is about the biggest bestsellers of the 20th century. The 12 of the biggest bestsellers of the 20th century, and 12 things that they have in common. And I had taught this course. Dennis Lehane was in the course, and a bunch of my good writers were in the course over the years. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this and trying to find like recurrent themes and issues and patterns in the biggest bestsellers of all time. And that's the distillation of all that is in this book from Random House that's called Hit Lit, Cracking the Code of the Bestseller. And that's out there. That's not my book, but it's
I can see a whole bunch of our author viewers switching over to Amazon right now.
Yeah, it's a fun book. It's the only book like that I've ever written that's nonfiction and kind of there's no dialogue, no sex, no violence. It was not very fun to write, but you know, it was a brain struggle.
Yeah, what we do is a whole lot more fun.
Oh, it is. You betcha.
All right. Well, we're actually in overtime right now. So before we go, Nick, anything else?
No, I think that's good. When we go into overtime, that's a good sign.
Oh yeah. Jim, I really thank you for being on here. You've been a guiding light for me, and it's an honor to have you on here, and it's a great honor to meet you.
Well, it works this way too. I'm honored to meet you guys too, and thank you so much for welcoming me into the group. I'll try to do my part. I haven't yet, but I will try to be a good member of this this new universe for me.
Great. Well, welcome to the club. I'd like to thank our sponsors, of course, tropicalauthors.com. If you're looking for a new book to read and you like my books and you like Jim's books and you like Nick's books, we have 30 other authors in that group, or 35. What's it up to now, Nick?
I think it's at 33, and we're going to have swag soon.
Yes, we're going to have swag soon. So thanks to tropicalauthors.com. Thanks also to Pirate Radio, music for the cruising lifestyle. You can download the app at the App Store. It's Pirate with a Y. And of course, Down Island Press, my publisher, and Aurora Publicity, my publicity company. Thank you all very much. And we will see you next month when our guests will be, don't know exactly who yet, but representatives from Kobo will be joining us. And that's going to be a lively discussion, I'm sure. Thank you very much and good night.